Hi, Maria. How are you doing? Can you hear me okay?
Good. Yes, I can hear you now.
Great. Fantastic. Let me.
Well, welcome. We're going to record this for North County Democratic Club. And I just wanted to give everyone in North County and CD 18 an opportunity to meet you and get to know you. So let's just get right to it, okay?
That sounds
Tell us a little bit about yourself.
absolutely. Well, I really appreciate this opportunity to get the chance to speak with you, to see everybody virtually again. And I've introduced myself in person beginning way back after I launched back in October. And a lot has changed since then, of course, but in a sense, not a lot has changed. So when I first, and by the way, let me know if I'm too soft, if I'm not coming across the right way, or anything else. But no, when I first introduced myself, we had that program on folks who were working on immigration and working with immigrants, and I got the opportunity to say hi and let folks know that huge reason I'm running is that I'm the son of immigrants, and my very first experience, I'm a lawyer, very first experience in the courtroom, the first time I ever spoke and set foot in a courtroom was when my mom got sworn in down in Miami as an immigrant. And she saw this country with the eyes of an immigrant, and was so blessed, so fortunate to have the chance to work hard here to create a future for my brother, myself. I was born up in Queens. Parents were both immigrants. My dad had come over from Cuba, my mom came over from Colombia, and they worked hard their entire lives. My mom worked in the garment district, was a nanny. My dad worked as a taxi driver. And then when he had to stop driving for health reasons, we moved down here. And I grew up relying on Social Security and Medicare. I worked my way through high school and college, and made it to Harvard Law, and then paid it back because I grew up with that sense of knowing what this country is all about, knowing what this country has given us, given my family, and knowing that that carries an obligation to pay back. And so I worked for retirees and pension funds and working people in unions, worked in the Attorney General's office for a couple of years, and tried to create opportunity throughout for working people, for seniors. I did AmeriCorps Vista even before law school, working for low-income communities from a faith-based organization. So that's what I've been about. And I view this run as a continuation of that record of service, of making sure that folks that have been left out, that haven't had their voices heard in Congress, especially working people, retirees, members of minority communities, that they get the voice, that representation that they deserve, and that they're not getting now. So that was back in October, and of course, things have changed. We now have a crisis. I don't have to tell folks that are watching this. We have over 200,000 cases of coronavirus in Florida. We've broken over almost 60,000 in the past 7 days, 7,400 almost new cases just yesterday. And then that's the cases. We also have almost 4,000 deaths, hospitalizations, and these cases, the pandemic, this crisis is affecting communities of color especially. There was a great article in the St. Lucie News and Tribune over the weekend showing that Hispanics, Latino Americans, and African Americans are disproportionately facing the harm of the health impact. And on the other side is the economic impact. We know that people are losing jobs, small businesses are at risk, and that's with the backstop of the CARES Act and congressional action. And that's set to expire, and people are going to be owing rent, and people are going to be in very tough times and very tough circumstances, especially in Florida, where our leadership has failed us and where we don't see the type of leadership we deserve to get us through this crisis. So it's, if anything, that ability of myself to pay it back, to make sure we get the representation in Congress deserves, it's more critical than ever. The stakes are just so much clearer just in the past few months. It's a long way of saying that's me, that's who I am, and I'm running for the honor of representing this district and making sure we do get that voice that we need in Congress.
So what would you say is your main motivation or inspiration to run for Congressional District 18, like specific to our district? What would you say is your primary inspiration or motivation to run for this office?
Absolutely. Well, this is my community. So I grew up here. I met my wife here. I got married here. This community gave me my little family. And it's not being served right. So we have folks here that are, about a quarter of the folks here are over 65. And I started this campaign talking about Social Security, Medicare. I grew up on both, and Congressman Mast has put both at risk. Its allies in Congress, the president have put both at risk. On healthcare, people are being left out, ignored. Even before I jumped in, we knew from Congressman Mass' vote against the Affordable Care Act, from the fact that he voted to take away people's health care without any plan in place. We knew where his sympathies are. And then he's voted against the prescription drug bill. It's only made worse. He's voted against the HEROES Act. He's made his record clear on what matters to folks here. And people are being squeezed. People are being harmed even before the last few months by prescription drug prices. I worked for the AARP Foundation before jumping in for a few months in 2019. So I know how it's affecting people. And on the environment, the climate crisis, we're on the front lines of it. And Congressman Mast tries to paint a picture of himself as an environmentalist, somebody who's a moderate on clean water, but that's inseparable from the climate crisis, from everything else that's affecting us. So short version of all that is, this is my community. It's not being served the right way. We deserve a better voice. We deserve a better representation, a better representative in Congress. Congressman Patrick Murphy did a fantastic job of looking out for folks here. He's endorsed me, I think folks know here. I have the honor of working with him, along with the AFL-CIO, Planned Parenthood. Leave groups out if I start naming them. But all these folks that are being left out by what representation we have know that this district, that our community deserves better. And that's why I'm in this. And I'm a first-time candidate. I knew jumping in that we needed a better voice in Congress, that we could have a direct impact on the presidential race here as well, and that there were the state races that are at issue. So all up and down the ballot, we have a critical election. I didn't have to tell anybody in the room in October, don't have to tell anybody now especially. So I could not sit on the sidelines knowing that I'd be the best shot to take on Congressman Mast, to get the district back, and to get that voice in Congress that we deserve. And so basically, that's what it boiled down to, is my community just isn't getting the voice it needs. We have all sorts of changes we can make up and down the ballot. And if I don't jump in and I wake up the day after Election Day, and I know I could have done more, and I wake up the day after Election Day like I woke up the day after Election Day in 2016, like so many of us did, I wouldn't be able to sleep at night knowing that I could have done more and didn't.
Thank you. I would like to go back to explore a little bit deeper the issues around coronavirus and what impact you think it has on our communities, and certain what your thoughts are around how it's been handled, what you would like to see be done better, and then I'd like to let's start there.
Sure, sure. There's plenty there, and we've been shining a light on this for months and months on some of the decisions that haven't been made, have been made poorly. So that includes the delay in closing things down, issuing a stay-at-home order, and Governor DeSantis was watching the White House basically and trying to see what the White House would basically allow. Even before that, take a step back. The communications we were seeing from the White House, this is a hoax, we're gonna go from 15 cases down to 0. Bottom line, we deserved a voice, a representative who, seeing all that and recognizing that he was speaking for a community that has so many folks in that over 65 population, he should have pushed back. All we've heard, I don't know if you've seen this interview on To the Point a few months back, sort of close to the beginning, Congressman Mast was asked about this. He was asked about the Trump administration's response, and he said, "Well, yeah, there were some hiccups in the communications, but look at Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi." That was his answer. And since then, he may have. I have not heard him push back on either Donald Trump or Governor DeSantis. Bringing it to today, we are of course seeing those record spikes. We're seeing more foot dragging on making sure that we take a step back, that we don't allow public facilities to be closed. Instead, we're going the opposite direction. Don't allow public facilities to be open when they're creating a risk for people. We haven't had a statewide requirement on wearing masks. Instead, we're going the opposite direction. The president has signaled that he wants schools to be open, and we see the edict come down from Tallahassee, open schools. And in Palm Beach County, just today or yesterday, or today and yesterday, the teachers, the folks that actually are on the front lines teaching students, the teachers union has said, wait a second, we can't rush into this. We have to have a better option, a better opportunity to look at how it's actually going to impact people at the same time that we're seeing these cases spike. And that's the health side. On the, and again, I don't want to skip past the fact that minority communities are being harmed. Latinos, I'm going to forget the exact numbers, but it's about 16-17% of the community, and seeing about 30-31% of cases. And we've seen a spike in our own community in Indiantown, north of Palm Beach, and in migrant communities throughout the state. There's a lot of impact, and a lot of folks that are deemed essential workers are in minority communities. African Americans are seeing the highest cases of all, and we're skipping past these as a state, and we should not be doing that. We should be doing more. That's the health side. The economic side, the fact that we are seeing at the last minute the eviction moratorium was continued. That's good. We have the CARES Act, unemployment assistance. Those are going to be running out, and we need action from Congress. We need action from our leaders. We need to ensure that we're helping municipalities, county governments. The HEROES Act does that in Congress. It's a direct action that you can take if you're a member of Congress who happens to represent a community that has an impact from the coronavirus. Congressman Mass voted against the HEROES Act. And we had a conversation on a virtual town hall about how the coronavirus will be impacting small businesses, how it's going to affect us in unemployment. In our community, in Palm Beach, Martin, St. Lucie, we're a tourism economy. We have a lot of small businesses. Brookings Institution did a study on where the impact of coronavirus closures will be felt the worst. And they found that something like a third of our businesses are at the second highest level of risk. I'm gonna get this backwards. And a fifth are at the highest level of risk. We've got a lot of businesses that are potentially gonna be closing. On the private industry side, that means jobs. We've got people lined up waiting for their unemployment checks and waiting, something we've shown a lot on very early on. Long answer, but it's a very complicated question. But bottom line, it comes down to, do you have somebody in Congress that's looking out for you, that says, you know what, I represent a community that's particularly hard hit, and even if sort of the edict comes down from the Republican Party that we don't like the HEROES Act, I'm gonna vote for the HEROES Act because my community needs it. Same thing on the health side, same thing on some of the decisions that are coming up for schools, for those kinds of things. That's what we need, and that's what we deserve. And I firmly believe Vice President Biden is not going to be the type of president that looks at a situation like the coronavirus and says, how might it affect my own political standing? I think he will look at it as the American people need this type of action. It may not be popular, may not make me look good, but I'm going to do it. However, if it comes to be the case that he does the wrong thing, and I get the honor of representing a community that's particularly hard hit, you better believe I will push back, and I will call them to account. Whoever sits in the governor's office, same sort of thing. We owe it to our community, if you get the honor of serving in Congress, to look out for them, to speak up for them. And it's absolutely clear from the coronavirus and from the response to this pandemic that we haven't been getting that in Congress now.
I want to ask a little bit specifically about the PPP and small business relief for our area. I do think that we do have a lot of, like you were saying earlier, that there are a lot of small businesses that are impacted by the coronavirus, and a lot of them like disproportionately, right? And so last night I was reading an article about members of Congress who are related to or directly involved in getting PPP funds, when we still have a lot of small businesses still trying to access capital to be able to survive. Can you comment a little bit on that?
Yes, no, I saw the same article as well. And bottom line, this goes to the bigger picture of what Congress should be doing. If I didn't mention it, I should have when I was talking about that study. One aspect of that is the fact that minority-owned businesses are particularly hard hit, and particularly find it hard to access the PPP loan. It wasn't working well. To the credit of some of our leaders, they were shining a light on places like Bank of America, I think it was, and don't quote me on that, but different banks that were saying, you must have a line of credit already with us, or we
Right.
won't even take your call. So we need to make sure that we get money in the pockets of workers and make sure that we're shoring up our businesses and make sure that no communities are left out. And that involves tough choices. We've run up a deficit. We had run up a deficit before from the tax cut from different choices that the Republicans in Congress made. We have to do what we can to get through this crisis and to make sure that if the PPP isn't working, isn't reaching people it needs to reach, that we renew it, that we expand on it. And we have to make sure it works. And there are businesses that that need the funds to survive. That are the classic small businesses that keep people employed. But there are people that look at the news reports. I saw the same thing and saw that Vern Buchanan, he has some businesses that he's tied to. He has an ownership stake in. And so I think if we're thinking about the same one, it was focused on Tallahassee and lobbying firms. Same thing in Washington, lobbying firms. We were told that lobbying firms weren't going to be getting funds. And so that's a problem. And that's something that Congress should focus an eye on and shine a light on, make sure that it works on. But at the same time, like we have to make sure that we are doing what we can to get the money into the pockets, into the hands, especially of workers. And the way we do that, the PPP has been successful in a lot of places in preserving jobs. The way we do that is make sure that we keep going with the programs that work and make sure that those businesses, those small businesses that keep up jobs that are really in trouble, are getting those funds.
Thanks. Thank you for that clarification. One of the other questions that has been an observation is that the coronavirus and quarantine kind of exposed a lot of fragility in how we're living. And you mentioned earlier about eviction moratorium and things like that. But your district, congressional district, spans 3 counties with all different kinds of housing issues as it relates to affordability and how much people are paying for housing versus their wages. And, I kind of think that St. Lucie County is a little different than Palm Beach County with respect to income and things like that. So can you speak on that a little bit more with respect to what you see your role in Congress being with respect to that?
Sure, absolutely. No, and that's an issue that's near and dear to my heart. Housing, affordable housing is an incredibly important issue. I actually I skipped over a little bit, but I did serve as an AmeriCorps Vista volunteer in a faith-based organization out of the AME Zion Church. And we were working in a particularly hard-hit area of North Carolina. It had been a tobacco area, had been a textile area. Of course, both of those went away when the hurricanes came through. And for years and years, it had been neglected. And we were working on affordable housing and leveraging all the different sources we could find. I wanted to fight homelessness. I wanted to fight the fact that people didn't have those opportunities to have a home for themselves, and was able there to see how much of it is tied to economic opportunity, how much of it is tied to lack of access to capital, and how much of it is just basic lack of supply. So we did some great grant writing, a lot of community building, a lot of different areas where we tackled the problem, but also I was working for a fantastic faith-based organization that also had a clinic, also had a credit union. I did some business education, business as my undergrad, and also reached out to members of the community that had been ignored. We had migrant workers that had recently arrived, and I did business training in Spanish. It was fantastic. And the lesson I got there was that we have to tackle some of these problems in a coordinated fashion and in a way that we work together and bring people together to make sure that that we're not thinking we have only one problem if folks have lack of access to capital, different things like that. And that translates here. Yes, St. Lucie is different from Martin, is different from Palm Beach. We don't have a lot of the high rents and a lot of the high home values in different parts of St. Lucie. We do have lack of access to capital. People, I sat down with folks up in Fort Pierce, and people were talking, a realtor even, and she had a great firsthand experience and opportunity to tell me about what she was hearing from people. It's very hard to scrape together a down payment. And even if you think that something is a housing opportunity is not as expensive compared to someplace in Miami or Palm Beach, if you don't have enough to get that down payment, it might as well be out in Mars, the home price. So that's part of, again, what we can do in Congress to make sure that we are creating that opportunity. I view it from my own perspective and from fixed income and from that background of making sure that people that are getting squeezed, we don't try to balance the budget on their backs, but that extends to education, that extends to jobs, that extends to economic opportunity. And in those areas, I mean, Congressman Mast voted against the Future Act, and that's from memory. It's the bill funding HBCUs and helping with Pell Grants. That's opportunity. That creates education, that creates the path to getting good jobs, well-paying job stability. He voted against it. Those kinds of choices that come before Congress are part of that larger picture. And sometimes you kind of think of it as isolated and yeah, that's just one vote. But you wouldn't think that if you had that opportunity of serving people in the community, listening to people in the community, and truly representing them. That's the challenge we have. And that's the change we can make. Absolutely.
Great. So the other major issue I think that is happening in our society now is around the issues of the movement for Black lives. Could you share some of your thoughts on what has occurred since the deaths of Breonna Taylor and George Floyd, and what your thoughts are in terms of how we build community?
Yes, no, so I appreciate that question, and it's another critical issue. Again, we have a very strong contrast. So I was proud to march with the NAACP and other folks in Stewart and in Fort Pierce, and then with Black Lives Matter in West Palm, and we need to make a change. It's as clear as that. A lot of people see it, and we have a great bill, the Justice and Policing Act, that passed the House. Don't have to say it, but I'll say it. Congressman Mast voted against it. And these are concrete steps that don't solve the problem, believe me, but they make a huge difference, and we will get that passed. If it's not in this Congress, if like so many other things, it stops at Mitch McConnell's desk, at Senator McConnell's desk, we will come back to it, and we'll make sure that we ban chokeholds. We'll make sure that we have the right incentives in place for training, for pay, for all different things. Congressman Val Demings had a great piece even before the act passed about all these different things that we can do in concrete fashion. A lot of it is municipal, a lot of it is county, but Congress does have a role to play. And it starts with acknowledging first that there's a problem. And it starts with acknowledging that we have to fix that problem. And it's our responsibility. It's not President Obama, I loved when he would turn this phrase, when he would say, look, this isn't, you think of this, it's not a Black person problem, it's not a brown person problem, it's an American problem. The fact that we have people dying in the streets and being killed by police officers, it's not just the community that's directly affected. That's something that all of us should take as a critical problem. So we have concrete steps that we can take. Some of them we are taking, and I'm thrilled to see that there is progress being made. There's also this whole other area of tolerance of hatred, tolerance of extremism that we have to push back on as much as possible. So that's, we can address the concrete issues and make sure we have a change. But until we have a change in tone and in approach, we will only make so much progress. And I view it as a cultural change on the presidential level. So on day one, when Vice President Biden comes in, we will not have somebody sitting in the White House talking about how, you know, both sides have opposing viewpoints after literally Nazis were marching in the streets. We won't have tolerance of anti-Semitism. We won't have tolerance of anti-LGBTQ plus violence and hatred and extremism. That's going to be a cultural change. It's something that we have to keep pushing on. But again, I'll go back to where I started. I have the distinct viewpoint of borrowing my parents' perspective of two people that came to this country as immigrants and seeing this country fresh and with new eyes, and passing through, not as dramatic as passing under the Statue of Liberty on a boat. They came in LaGuardia or Kennedy, but they lived in New York and saw the everyday the Statue of Liberty and knew what this country is, and saw it with those eyes. And I get to borrow that. I know what this country is, and all of the good things that we stand for, the Declaration of Independence, all through the Civil Rights Movement, everything that we've fought for. I get that perspective. I know we've made mistakes and we've fallen short, but all of it is places where we've fallen short of what this country is and should be. And that cultural change is where we say, this is what this country is and should be. And the fine people on both sides and that tolerance of extremism, that is not what this country is. So we have a fantastic opportunity to make sure that we get our country back. And it's going to make a huge change in January when we do on the presidential level. And that's just a starting point, because we have a lot of work to do to make sure that we do bring people together and get back again to making sure that we all are working together to get back to that American goal.
Thank you. So I have one last question, and it's sort of like out of the Inside the Actors Studio playbook. And so, and it's one of my favorite things. I'm going to just ask you one of the questions from there. And what is your favorite virtue?
What is my favorite virtue? That's interesting. So, and I wasn't, I have a hearing aid, and so I wanted to make sure I heard it right. So I actually, when I was a kid growing up, we were lower income, and I participated in like an outreach program for kids up in Fort Pierce, and it was a summer program. It was fantastic, and they taught us, and we got an opportunity to learn some job skills and different things, and got a similar question, and I said perceptive, and then and I was a nerd as a kid. You probably figured that out, and the instructor wrote it down as perspective. It was great, but either one works. And a better way of saying that is empathy, and seeing where people are not being heard and not being seen. And it sounds a little canned, but it's true, and it's something that served me. The fact that that I can step outside of myself and I can see where there is a need and where people are left out, and I've tried to serve in those instances. I mean, in law school, I was working for a clinic for women at risk of homelessness and for veterans, and they wouldn't have had the help of fancy lawyers otherwise. And same thing in AmeriCorps, same thing in pro bono work, even in town and private practice. I think that's a critical need for anyone that aspires to be a leader. Is you get to rub shoulders and be around people that are powerful and influential and have their needs met. But if you forget that there's a whole other world out there of people that have trouble every day in their lives, that are working as hard as possible, then you're not serving the people you're supposed to be serving. I have a different perspective. I've waited tables, I've washed dishes, I've gotten some of that, but it's been a while since I've done that. So it's easy to lose sight. It's easy to lose sight that that most people don't have the ability to go to these fancy places and rub elbows with these fancy people, and those are the people that we should be serving in Congress, that our government is for all the people, but especially for the folks that need a voice and need that representation in Congress. And that's ultimately what I'm fighting for. I'm making sure that our community gets in Congress.
Well, I want to thank you for spending this time with me, and I look forward to posting this video. It's been very enlightening and informative for me. I hope it will be for everyone that sees it, and I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the conversation, and hope you have a good rest of the afternoon.
Thank you. Take care.
You too.